I'm Darley Newman, and I'm here in Somerville, New Jersey, exploring History on the Green, an event which brings history to life. In this episode, we're taking a revolutionary road trip in New Jersey. Welcome to Travels with Darley. We're taking a revolutionary road trip in central New Jersey, sharing historic sites related to the American Revolution. New Jersey, one of the original 13 colonies, has a rich history. We're diving into Somerset County and Middlesex County in places like Somerville, New Brunswick, Perth Amboy, and Piscataway to share lesser-known stories from colonial recipes and colleges to a George Washington encampment. We're starting our New Jersey Revolutionary road trip a little over 30 miles from New York City in Somerville, the county seat of Somerset County and home to many buildings listed on the National Register of Historic Places. I'm meeting Dr. Iris DeRode at one of these, the Wallace House, where George Washington spent a winter during the American Revolutionary War. Dr. DeRode is a Dutch historian who specializes in the French participation in the American Revolution.
Yeah, so this home stands along the Washington-Rochambeau Trail, which is a trail that goes from Newport, Rhode Island, all the way to Yorktown in Virginia. It's about 700 miles long, and it is the road on which Washington and Rochambeau, and particularly their troops, marched all the way down south. The Continental Army that the Americans had just created didn't have the expertise to fight against the British, nor the money, nor the weapons, and also not the fleet. And the Americans needed help. Louis XVI, the king, wanted to really help the American rebels to fight against the British.
Share with me a little bit about the Washington-Rochambeau Trail in the state of New Jersey.
What's interesting about New Jersey in particular is when the French marched through here, they were very curious to see Trenton and Princeton in particular, because George Washington had sort of this surprise attack, and they all wanted to understand that by going to Trenton and by going to Princeton.
Why do you think it's important for people to look back and learn about this history?
It's more, for me, the continuation of the values that were fought for during the Revolution. Of course, most of these values are limited. Today, you would say, what about slavery? What about women? What about the Native Americans? But at the same time, the foundations for the values that we're still fighting for today, for instance, democracies, liberties, and equality, these are, of course, the fights we're still fighting today, but they started there. And so that's, for me, the lesson that we should all look back to that time to understand the time period, but also the world we're in today.
I'm visiting Somerville at an interesting time. It's the annual History on the Green, a day highlighting the area's history related to the Revolutionary War. Dr. DeRode has traveled here for this event to share something she unearthed in her research.
Franklin, living in Passy at the time, which is close to Paris, organized a grand dinner to celebrate the independence of the United States. One of the more fun things that I found was in Franklin's paper, in a footnote, you can find the lyrics of a very interesting song that was performed at his home on 4th of July, 1783. There was a drinking song performed by the Abbé Morlet, who was actually a famous philosopher of the French Enlightenment. And it's a very funny song because he's just saying that he wants to be an American. And it's a long song, and you have to imagine they were quite, of course, they had had some drink, so it's one of these like fun songs.
The Middlesex County Volunteers Fifes and Drums are in Somerville to perform this song for the first time in 240 years. And they're doing it at History on the Green. Antoine Watts relays the lyrics.
I will never complain on the fate that made me a Frenchman. But at this moment, I envy another country. In this feast, I make myself American.
One of the remarkable parts of the song is that Trenton is being named.
I want to go to the fields of Trenton to pay homage to Washington, the Fabius of America.
They're not singing about Yorktown. They're not singing about any of the other battles in the war, but Trenton is the only one. So apparently, for the French at the time, the Battle of Trenton was a very important moment in the war. At History on the Green, all ages have come out to participate with living history, combining art with reenactments, music, literature, and even cannon fire. Colleen Marr, who grew up in Somerset County and is now the county administrator, takes a few moments to share more about the rich history of the area
and destinations to visit.
So George Washington spent 9 months here during the American Revolutionary War at the Wallace House. He spent 4 months, and throughout Somerset County, we have what we call the 5 generals' homes. So the generals that were really important to him to strategize during the American Revolution actually had a significant presence here.
Travelers can visit these 5 generals' homes, where General George Washington and 4 of his top generals lived during the Middlebrook encampment of 1778 to 1779. I'm setting off from the Green to tour downtown with Natalie Pinero with the Downtown Somerville Alliance.
Downtown Somerville, lots of small businesses here.
Sure, we have more than 100 small businesses. What I really love about the ambiance here is that we are a mashup of historic meets modern, which really gives us a unique vibe that I don't think you can really find a lot of other places.
We pop into Boulevard Seafood for lunch.
Boulevard Seafood is family run, family owned. Allison and her husband and her brother, their son is also in the kitchen.
Trained at the Culinary Institute of America, Scott Snyder and his wife Allison source their seafood directly from the New Fulton Fish Market in New York City and offer up an array of tasty options for locals and travelers alike.
Well, I love restaurants where you can see the action in the kitchen, and of course supporting small businesses too. So
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Cheers.
We meet up again with Dr. DeRode at a French restaurant across from the Green to toast history, before I continue to the town of Hillsborough, further away from Manhattan in central New Jersey. It's here that rolling farmland makes me feel far away from the city, even though I'm just about 50 miles outside of Times Square. Billy Jordan shares how he started as a home brewer and went on to create Flounder Brewery in a barn that's more than 2 centuries old.
We're walking through right now about a 155-year-old English barn.
And there are 2 barns here. You have the English style and the Dutch style.
That Dutch barn, which was adapted from a particular design coming from the Netherlands, is historically significant, much more so than this. It's about 255.
So when you come to Flounder Brewing Company, you can have a beer in a barn that predates the American Revolution.
Outside, guests can order from food trucks and wait for their wood-fired pizza while watching horses graze.
Got your post and beam ale for the architecture.
So that's just to honor where we are. After this style of barn.
And I'm trying the Hill Street honey.
You are Hill Street, our very first beer, American Blonde Orange Blossom Honey. Honey from Fruitwood Orchards in southern New Jersey.
Ooh, I like this. I like that hint of honey.
And award-winning.
Award-winning and made from ingredients right here in New Jersey, in this historic setting.
Exactly.
For more New Jersey history brought to life, I'm traveling about 12 miles from Hillsborough to East Jersey Old Town Village, which is sort of like a mini colonial Williamsburg. It's in Piscataway, New Jersey, in Middlesex County. Mark Nanastide, the county historian, is showing me around East Jersey Old Town Village.
This is a collection of historic buildings, about 15 of them, that were relocated to this park back in the 1970s and early 1980s. There's a schoolhouse, a church, we have a blacksmith shop, a barn. We're also part of the crossroads of the American Revolution National Heritage Area, as well as the Washington Rochambeau National Historic Trail. And we interpret a broad swath of the past, both from the colonial period, the 18th century, the Revolutionary War, but we also go into the 19th century. You know, the American Revolution led to, another revolution, the Industrial Revolution. In our print shop here, we talk about that time period and demonstrate some of the historic equipment that we have. So we have military reenactors here as well, interpreting both the Revolutionary War period as well as the Civil War. And they do musket firing demonstrations on the Green. And of course, this is an important part of the interpretation of our site.
Next, we're stepping inside a colonial home.
So we're heading to the Pound House. This home was built in the late 1700s, and we talk about home and hearth cooking during the colonial period.
Thank you. We've got some pickled eggs.
We have pickled eggs and dill pickles, some dried apples and some dried green beans because they had to get all of their food through the winter. There was no grocery store to rescue them.
This is the biggest squash I've ever seen. Where did you get this?
We grew it in our kitchen garden.
My goodness.
This one has my salt in it and the other one my pepper.
Sharon Goodman is not only growing crops, she's cooking up dishes using colonial ingredients and recipes.
This is bread made with a recipe from colonial times that you have made.
That I have made in the old-fashioned way. Would you like to try?
Absolutely.
Bread was a very important part of the diet for the family, so they would have bread with every meal. And so they baked a lot of bread, probably about 30 loaves per week.
I would love to have a sandwich with this.
There you go. You were fitting right into 18th century.
I start with bread and end inside a tavern where in colonial times I might have been toasting with a beer.
So we're in the Indian Queen Tavern. This building was originally built in the 1700s in New Brunswick. And in fact, it was one of the first buildings to be relocated here to East Jersey Old Town in the 1970s.
Of course it was first. You got to bring the tavern in, and then everything else follows.
We have a display of tavern life from that period. Taverns were important buildings in colonial America, especially here in New Jersey. Our location between New York and Philadelphia, there were many overland routes. So to accommodate those travelers, communities set up taverns for people to get food, but also to spend the night as well. And so there's this exchange of information that takes place in a building like this.
Mark, what types of drinks would they have had in a tavern like this?
Well, so some of the historic records that survive list the different types of wines that they served. We have wine bottles that were imported from England, also from France.
So wine, perhaps beer, maybe some Applejack?
Yep. That was well known in New Jersey as well.
It's pretty special that here in New Jersey there are all these sites that you can visit. It really does help paint a picture of what life was like.
In Middlesex County, where modern buildings and businesses thrive, history can still be remembered. In New Brunswick, New Jersey, home to Rutgers University, I'm diving into seafood at one of these.
This used to be the site of a historic tavern where George Washington actually had a headquarters at one point. And just down the street was the Indian Queen Tavern that we just visited. So all of this area of New Brunswick was actually dotted with taverns. It was once a vibrant location. They would have been talking about subjects related to colonial times and perhaps enjoying some seafood themselves.
Rutgers University dates back to 1766 and was founded as Queen's College, named after Queen Charlotte. There were 9 colonial colleges chartered before the Declaration of Independence was signed, and 2 of these are in New Jersey, Rutgers and Princeton. Mark Nonestide meets me by Rutgers campus to share more New Brunswick history.
Washington was retreating through New Jersey, crossed over the Raritan to New Brunswick. This rise here on the outskirts of New Brunswick is where Alexander Hamilton, in order to stall the British advancement, set up a cannon battery here and bombarded the British positions just across the Raritan. Americans were here. They were slowly retreating through New Jersey, south to Princeton, Trenton, and then eventually across the Delaware into Pennsylvania. So, very significant action that took place here in the Revenue to slow the British. I mean, had they gone up to Washington, the whole war would have gone a tremendously different direction.
So another area of New Jersey that was a hotbed of activity during the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
Colonel Henry Rutgers was a philanthropist and Revolutionary War hero who gave a critical endowment to what would become Rutgers University. Trains roll by and cars meander around where Mark and I are walking, reminding us that the city of New Brunswick has long been a hub city, holding a strategic location halfway between New York City and Philadelphia. It's located along the Raritan River and what was an early colonial route, the King's Highway. Isha Vias, Division Head of Folklife and Cultural Heritage for the Arts Institute of Middlesex County, takes me for an afternoon drink to share more of how this hub city draws in diversity and culture.
New Brunswick has been a commercial area since the time of the Revolution. As you can see, there are businesses, restaurants. In fact, there are over 50 restaurants in this downtown area of New Brunswick.
I know, I'm liking our Indonesian drinks right now, and I was seeing Thai, I'm seeing Mexican and Southwestern, and all sorts of interesting choices for food down here.
So as you can see, we just passed the State Theater. It's historic in Central Jersey.
Lots of arts and culture in this one block.
Oh yeah, you have Mason Grove School of Arts of Rutgers University, NB-PAC, New Brunswick Performing Arts Center, which is the home for George Street Playhouse, Crossroads Theater, American Repertory Ballet. We have New Brunswick Cultural Center here.
So an artist community that is being fostered by the community here in New Brunswick.
That's correct.
Back in Piscataway, close to East Jersey Old Town Village, I meet Mark again at the Cornelius Lau House, one of only 2 homes left from the historic port community of Raritan Landing.
This home is so well restored, and what a great example of Georgian architecture.
Yeah, it's a tremendous house built in 1741. It was originally the home of Cornelius Slout, who was a wealthy merchant.
Mark, how much of what we see in the home today still survives from the 18th century?
There's a tremendous amount. Fireplaces, original Delft tiles, an original staircase. And in fact, in this room, one of the grand rooms of the house where he probably entertained people. The floors are original. The paneling's all original, the window seats, even the plaster, all survives from that period. You know, he dies when the Revolutionary War is just starting, right? And we believe he had loyalist leanings, enough so that it kind of left a cloud over the estate.
One son was a loyalist and the other a patriot. Lawyer Alexander Hamilton helped the family sell the property.
Here was a family that had these split loyalties.
It divided communities, families, quite a tumultuous time period, and this house remains to tell the story.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Back in the city of New Brunswick, I'm having dinner with Chef Bruce Lefebvre at the Frog and the Peach. This Culinary Institute of America trained chef is serving up colonial-inspired dishes at his top-rated restaurant.
Well, Chef, I can hear the colonial music playing. So much history right here. And now we're going to try some colonial-inspired fare.
George Washington Mount Vernon hoe cakes, H-O-E, cakes. The recipe is original through generations, passed down through cooks that worked at Mount Vernon.
And why were they called hoe cakes?
So hoe cakes can be cooked either on a grill or a hoe being a gardening tool. So when they were in camp, that's what they would use. They would heat it up over a fire and have a little griddle.
How inventive. I love it. And we have this savory stew here as well.
Yes, so this stew is called pepper pot stew. So it would have been a staple in West Africa, came through the slave trade to the Northeast. And the story goes that George Washington wanted something particularly savory and delicious with the few rations that they had left. Part of the peppers are these peppers here, the Scotch bonnets, which would have been from the Caribbean, and black pepper and clove.
It has a nice spice to it, nice kick.
Allspice and clove, little nutmeg. Some of the traditional kind of British spices are mixed with the Caribbean.
We've got Caribbean and we've got British and all of these different elements combining into this meal. And it's very similar to what's in New Brunswick out there today, where we have this diversity of restaurants and a diversity of flavors. And we're seeing it in the past and in the present here.
Exactly, yes. A really nice melting pot.
I'm traveling to Perth Amboy along the Raritan Bay, less than a mile across the Arthur Kill from Staten Island. Lisa Nanton takes me through the Propriety House, home to the last New Jersey royal governor, William Franklin, the illegitimate son of Benjamin Franklin.
The Propriety House is the only royal governor's mansion left from the original 13 colonies.
Exactly. Original. Now, there were other governor's mansions, but they were private residence. And the one in Williamsburg is a replica. But this is the real deal here. The East Jersey proprietors were adamant about having William Franklin live in Perth Amboy because Perth Amboy was the capital of the colony of New Jersey at the time. And that's why they built the house. So it was built by the East Jersey proprietors for the royal governor, and that's why it's the royal governor's mansion.
How is it that it survived all this time?
Well, I think because when they built it, they actually built it as a fortress for the royal governor because these walls are 4 bricks thick. This is William Franklin accepting the charter from Queen's College from King George III, which is now Rutgers University. So he founded our state university. Thank you, William. Well, William Franklin was the royal governor of the colony of New Jersey, and I'm sure there was a little nepotism in there because he was the son of Ben Franklin. This is a copy, an oil copy of the portrait of William Franklin. For all the royal governors, which most of them escaped when they got wind of the Revolution, William Franklin stood his ground right here, would not give up until they actually came in and handcuffed him and took him off to prison, where he became very ill. He lost all his teeth. They contacted Ben Franklin, you know, your son is in dire straits here. And Ben Franklin's, I have no son. He completely rejected him.
What was Perth Amboy like during this time period?
Well, it was basically a Tory stronghold. Last vestiges of British rule took place here when Franklin was arrested. But it's a grand house, and it really deserves all the attention it can get because it is important to our history.
Close to the Proprietary House is St. Peter's Episcopal Church.
So this is St. Peter's Episcopal Churchyard. If you notice, it's on this rise overlooking Raritan Bay. And during the Revolutionary War in 1776, the British sailed into the bay and they bombarded the city and the positions here. Some of the markers from that time were damaged and can still be seen in the burial ground today.
Marks of that particular grave marker might have been damaged by cannons, or?
Right, yeah. I mean, there's ships that are sailing into Raritan Bay firing, cannons off the decks and bombarding locations here in Perth Amboy. And it's amazing that after all these years, they survived. They're ancient markers to begin with. This one here is from the 1730s, but if you look on the lower part of it, you can see there's a hole blown directly through it. It's a real sort of walk through history when you walk through this space and you see all these ancient markers and the designs and the decorations that are on them. And it's really a cross-section, too, of the population that lived in the city as well. The congregation itself forms in the late 1600s. There's an earlier church that's here. The current church was completed by 1852 in the Gothic revival style, and the interior still retains a lot of the original detailing from that period.
One of the stained glass windows shows John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Edward Rutledge waiting to cross the Arthur Kill for peace negotiations with the British on September 11th, 1776. If you're touring around Perth Amboy and you ask a local where to dine, you may hear about the barge. It's been around since 1925, and I've heard it's a locals place. People say it's akin to their Cheers place here. And people drive in from all over to try the seafood, a specialty, and to have these beautiful historic waterfront views. And I'm here to dive into the shrimp cocktail. It was at Perth Amboy's City Hall that New Jersey became the first state to ratify the Bill of Rights. Mayor Helman Kaba and I look at the impressive exterior before checking out some archaeological highlights. Mayor, the City Hall is beautiful.
It's beautiful and rich in history.
I see the seal up here referencing the terracotta, which was manufactured here for such a long time.
Yes.
A lot of terracotta made here.
A lot of terracotta. If you drive around Perth Amboy, you will see a lot of terracotta. Across the street is George Washington statue that's also one of a kind, made out of terracotta.
Got us down in the basement here.
Yes. City historian John Dyke joins us to share more of the city's history.
When you're plowing a field for farming, you need to remove the field stones. So they were brought here and City Hall was built. And they're held together with oyster shell mortar that's well over 3 centuries old.
This mixture would have gone into the construction of many buildings in the area.
Every colonial building would have been made in this area with Perth Amboy oyster shells. And it was a big business. Oystering was a big business for many, many years in Perth Amboy. And we were supposed to have oyster shells that were better than those at Cape Cod and better than those in Maryland. We were supposed to have the sweetest tasting oysters.
I look outside at this building and it's so impressive. It looks like a strong, heavy brick building, and it's interesting to come down here in the basement and see that it is held together with its foundation with this oyster shell construction.
Could you imagine that? I mean, you build a building nowadays, you're lucky if it lasts 50 years. This building has been here from 1714.
A building built on oyster shells.
Just one of the many surprising revelations from this trip through Central Jersey, where diverse communities are fostering creativity, food, art, preservation, and innovation, and holding on to their roots while they share their stories in modern times. We're closing out this revolutionary road trip in New Jersey with quite a send-off here in Somerville on the Green. I'm Darley Newman, and thanks so much for joining me on these adventures into the past. And thanks for watching. Hi. Let's get this party started. Why is it so heavy? As easy as 1, 2, 3. You got some strong legs on here. Hello.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Bob. Okay, great.
Bob.
That's for Bob. Okay. I like the George Washington cocktails the best. I'm gonna.
You can see why.
Okay.